Welcome back to another episode of DIJAH's Café, where we keep it real, relevant, and rooted in purpose. I'm your host, Khadijah Steward, and tonight we are diving into a topic that affects so many individuals and families, especially when life takes an unexpected turn: personal injury and legal advocacy. Whether it's a car accident, a slip and fall, or navigating your rights after a traumatic incident, many of us really don't know what to do until it's too late. That's why I am so excited to have a guest with us who not only understands the law, but also the people behind the cases. Please help me in welcoming Antonio Authors, a personal injury attorney, my friend, fellow BNI Matrix member, who's been doing incredible work in both the courtroom and the community. Thank you so much for joining, Antonio.
Thank,
Welcome. Mhm.
thank you. Thank you for having me, Khadijah. It's
How
great to be
are
here.
you today? It's the summertime, so I know as an attorney, things are getting hectic out there.
It really is. I just was in court earlier today, and it's just been packed with a lot of people traffic. It's been pretty busy, so even the courts don't take a day off, but it's been going all right so far.
Cool. I'll be honest with you, as a retired claims adjuster, I never thought I'd be interviewing an attorney. Never. But it's so interesting. I chose you because honestly, I haven't, and I'm going to just might embarrass you a little bit, but I haven't met an attorney before with the compassion that I see you with, right? You are, you're different. You're different. I spent about 15 years adjusting claims in all lines, both personal and business lines of insurance, and talking with you because we meet every week, right? We're BNI members in Jersey, BNI Matrix. And honestly, the compassion that you speak about when you talk about your clients, right? So before we get into the legal details, tell us what drew you to personal injury law in the first place?
Well, initially, as it would have it, I was looking to do something more like employment discrimination, that type of law when I was first starting out. But as fate would have it, I interned with a personal injury firm uh, right around the time I was about to enter law school. And then that first summer, I did the same internship, got more experience handling and doing research on personal injury cases. I also did insurance defense side beforehand, more the paralegal side, but that what didn't really was my thing, but when I started to do the plaintiff side, now you get to interact with the people, you get to see how the injuries and the accidents affect their lives, and you get to have an effect on trying to help them get a recovery. So even though I started out in one way, I ended up doing personal injury as, my experience from my internships kind of led me in that direction.
Yeah, we tend to think that we're going to do one thing, right? And then once we get our feet wet a little bit, it's like, oh, okay, this is what I'm doing. So we're going to answer some questions because I also hear from people all the time about what do I do with an injury and what's going on. So we're going to actually define some things today, right? So that folks won't be confused. The summer is coming. We know there's going to be lots of accidents out there, unfortunately. So
Yeah.
folks need to really know. So Antonio, tell us, what is considered a personal injury case and what are the most common ones you see?
Okay. So for my firm, Goldstein, we see a lot of cases involving automobile accidents and slip and fall accidents. That's primarily the type of cases that we see. So in an automobile accident, one of the main questions that we ask, first of all, is whose fault is it? When we look at how an accident happens, if a person is injured as a result of the negligence of another driver, then that's a case that we see that we typically take on. Uh, However, if there's an accident, we look at the facts and the reports, and there's faults that may be placed on the claimant more so than the person that they allege caused the harm. Uh, it might be a more difficult case to recover from because if it ended up going to trial, a jury may apportion liability more so against a claimant. And if you do that, you get no recovery. So a personal injury case is a case where you can prove that you sustained a serious injury that was caused due to the negligence of another party.
Thank you for that definition. So basically, as an attorney, when you first take a case, you have to really evaluate whether or not it's going to be something that you can actually recover from for the client.
Yeah, absolutely. That's first interaction, first meeting with the client. I've done intakes at the office. Every attorney in the office does the intakes. We have a typical form that they fill out. We ask for any relevant documents and reports, police reports, investigative reports. If they fell in a store, usually an incident report that was prepared by a store employee or manager. We review the narrative of the report, and then we discuss with the clients at that early stage uh, our view of liability. If it's favorable, we typically sign on that case. If it's a case and it has happened where we get the report and it doesn't appear that we would be able to prevail on liability, we have that conversation early on just to let them know, hey, we don't see it as a viable claim. However, we do tell them that it's your right to consider other options. You may consult with other attorneys. They may see it a little differently. But, at least from our perspective and our opinion, a case like that, we wouldn't take on necessarily.
It's interesting because you did something that people don't think personal injury attorneys do, right? To possibly say, look, you can go somewhere else if you like, right? It's your option. PI attorneys, and we call them PI attorneys in the industry world, right? Um,
Correct.
in the claims world, literally are, they get a bad rap because they just chase, right? Ambulance chasers. I know you've heard that. I know you
Oh,
heard
it's the
what's called.
stereotype that prevails all the time. They think we hang out at hospitals, just handing out our cards to any old person that's walking in with a neck brace, but it's not like that. It's a deep analysis when it goes into taking the case, at least for our firm, every time.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. So what should someone do immediately after being hurt in an accident?
So anytime when somebody calls the office and I pick up the phone and I talk to them and I hear how the accident happened, I always ask them where they're hurting, how severe their pain is, and sometimes they don't know what to do, so they're like, "Should I go to the hospital? Should I go to the doctor?" I'm like, "Absolutely. First thing you should do is get medical attention." Whether it's going to the emergency room or whether, your primary care, whatever it is, as soon as possible. Because what happens if you delay in getting your treatment, and not too many people really think about this, especially after an accident, it may not necessarily harm your case, but the way that claims adjusters evaluate if there's a significant gap of treatment, it may increase your likelihood of having the claim denied or getting to litigation where it goes to trial. And that's one of the defenses that comes up is the delay in treatment. But, a lot of those cases, if the delay is not too significant, we can get around that. But also most people don't in real life run to the hospital. They think their pain will go away. And typically when it doesn't, that's when they seek my attention. So it's also, not abnormal when we get those cases where there's no first date of treatment until 2 or 3 weeks after the date of accident. But first thing first, seek medical attention right away.
I'm glad you said that, right? Because I know we used to always, obviously, we learned this in claims that, the injury and the pain may not be right away, right? Because obviously we talk about that sometimes, people, when they see, if you're looking your rear view mirror and someone's getting ready to hit you and you know it, you're going to brace for it and you're going to stiffen
Absolutely.
up, right? And then, but that pain doesn't come sometimes, like you said, until maybe a couple of days afterwards. And then people normally wait to see if the pain's going to go away, and then they go to the ER. So I'm glad you mentioned that, right? Because the reality of things, like we said, we keep it real here, is that you may not have that injury right away, and you may not feel it. It's there, but you may not feel it. Correct?
That's correct. It might take the next day or a couple days after, and then that pain starts to linger and it doesn't go away. What that soreness that you think might you might sleep off and it's not there may indicate a permanent injury. You're not going to know that until you seek medical attention or get a diagnostic test like an X-ray or MRI. But first things first, you got to see a doctor just to get that ruled out.
So, what are some big mistakes people make after an injury that could hurt their case later?
Well, first things first, you want to make sure you document everything. If you're able to, if, for example, in an automobile accident, uh, if you're able to take photos of the scene, photos of the property damage, anything that you can show that depicts the accident, you want to be able to do that. Or even if you fell, take a picture of the condition, the dangerous condition that caused you to fall. Because a lot of times what happens, insurance companies might say, well, you don't have proof of what caused you to fall. How do you know you know this dangerous condition caused you to fall? And it'll just make liability harder to prove. But you want to be able to document the accident and take any photographs as soon as possible.
So if a little grandma rear ends me in the back and I have a big dent, I shouldn't just let her go home.
You want to be able to take her information, take any photographs at the scene, just so they know that in real time, this is how the condition of the vehicle and everything surrounding it was at the time of the accident. You want a fair and accurate representation of the damage and all that.
Even if it is a 75-year-old grandmother. Definitely.
Exactly. That nice 75-year-old lady also makes mistakes.
And she probably has an insurance policy that will cover her. So
Exactly.
yes.
Exactly.
Do you find that people wait too long to get legal help?
Typically, and one thing that depends on, the community and everybody, reacts differently to personal injury. Some folks, it's their first time and they don't want to pursue a claim and they're hesitant to really call an attorney. But one of the things that I think people are kind of increasing in knowledge is knowing their rights, with certain injuries or how to pursue a claim. So I find more and more that as soon as an accident happens, typically within that week, I'll get a phone call. I've seen that more and more in my years of practice versus, maybe some folks are adverse to pursuing a claim and, maybe don't wait a month or two, which may, not necessarily be fatal to their case, but it'll hinder their recovery. But I think people are more and more not hesitant to reach out to get an attorney's consult. And that could be due to media, that could be due to advertising. You see a lot of billboards, TV ads, radio ads, and I think it puts the thought in their minds, hey, maybe I should see an attorney about this. And sometimes we get calls. We'll get the call every so often where there really is not much going on. It's like sometimes I talk to the person and my first question is, are you hurt? Do you feel anything? They're like, no, but, I just wanted to call an attorney. And, there's no harm, no foul because they wanted to know their rights. And a lot of times they figure, well, I'm in an accident. I don't know what to do. Let me call an attorney. And that's a good impulse to have anyway.
That was going to be my next question, right? So how can someone know if they need to contact an attorney if it's something they can handle on their own?
I always say if you're unsure or if you have that inclination, just call. It doesn't hurt to call an attorney. Of course, if you're hurt, you feel soreness, you're not sure what to do, call an attorney, schedule a consult, and they can advise you on the next steps.
That makes sense, right? Because a consult doesn't cost anything.
No,
right?
For our office, and I know for most offices, it's a free consultation.
Okay, cool. I had somebody once, and this is going to be the last kind of, I guess you can say, personal injury question, because I want to talk a little bit about career as an attorney for you. But I had somebody call me the other day because I'm a claims adjuster, so they know a little bit, well, this is what you dealt with. What do you do? They were like, well, my attorney told me I need to have had 20 visits and I only had 12. So what should I do? Should I get a new attorney or should I stay with them? What would you recommend for someone like that?
I always recommend that the client exercise the right to choose whoever they want as their attorney. Every attorney has a different perspective on treatment, on handling a case. and also advising clients on how to pursue, their claim and how to treat their injuries. So for me, I can only speak to as to me. If somebody came to me, they did conservative treatment. Uh, if they're still in pain, I say, look, you're still in pain. You might want to go back, get another opinion, get some more treatment, uh, only because it does help. Realistically, it does help, with the value of their case, the longer that they're treating, and the more invasive type of treatment that they get. The reality is, the way claims adjusters and insurance companies assess those cases, they're going to put more value on a case that an injured person treated for an extended period of time versus maybe somebody who has soft tissue injuries and only underwent minimal treatment. Of course, for our firm, we treat all of those cases all the same either way. But we do have that conversation with the client of realistic values of their case and settlement expectations. But I would tell them, if you're not looking for any more treatment, um, and some attorneys out there do try to push their clients to do more treatment to try and pump up the value of the case. So we don't do that, of course. But if you're uncomfortable with that, you may want to seek another attorney or consult. And we always tell our clients, you're free to consult and get a second opinion if you want. It's always their right.
Mhm. I have to say that is something that I admire about your firm, right? That you're not gold diggers, right? You're not ambulance chasers. You really want what's best for the client. And I will say that there are not firms out there that are like that always, but Goldstein and Goldstein definitely appears to be that firm that cares about the client, not necessarily paycheck. So
Absolutely. And
we
we've been in the
appreciate that.
community in Essex County for over 30 plus years. So we have a client base that they know who we are. We have a reputation in the community. And a lot of our client base comes from referrals. So if we do a
Wow.
good job, they always come back with, someone that they know and recommend us. So we try to keep that reputation.
Love it. Oh my gosh. Awesome. Okay, now, Antonio, let's get into the juicy part, right? You're an attorney, and we all know law school. So there's bachelor's degree first, correct?
That's
Then
correct.
there's law school, which is how many years?
3 years, on average, is 3 years. Some people take a part-time program, so that could be 4. Or, some people do an accelerated program. You could be done in 2.5, or maybe even less than that.
And then there's a bar exam that needs to be passed.
Correct.
And how long do you study for that?
Typically, the summer after you graduate law school. So if the bar exam, which is usually around the end or mid-July, probably 2 months or so out of law school, you go straight into studying for the bar exam.
Wow. Okay, so I worked with some of my fellow adjusters were attorneys. People don't know that sometimes attorneys will actually go into the insurance side, like you said, you did a little bit before actually practicing, or they just may choose that side of it. So, what inspired you to pursue a career in law? Because I'm telling you, it just to me seemed like it was too much. It did.
Yeah.
But why? Why? What did it?
Well, I'll keep it real. So when I first got out of college, I didn't really think initially about going into law. I ended up in social services, working in group homes for mentally disabled adults. And
Oh,
it was, I loved the job. It was a fulfilling job. But I think for me, I wasn't professionally challenged,
mm,
and so what happened, I think I visited a friend who was in law school, had a discussion with him, and a light bulb just kind of lit up around this. I was like, this might be something I could consider. So
wow.
it's kind of like one of those, situations where you put one foot in front of the other. I think I got a LSAT prep book and I kind of read it, took some tests. I was like, okay, well, this is doable. Uh,
Wow.
Eventually studied and took the LSAT, applied for, well, even before I even get to that point, I think before I did that, I went to paralegal school. One of the local schools in the area had a certificate program. So I did that while working full time. And the way my schedule worked was I was able to go to school in the morning and then work full time in the evening. So it wasn't really much of uh, a burden for me or a major shift. So I was able to get a paralegal certificate. I ended up switching careers from doing the group homework uh, to getting a paralegal job
Mm.
a couple of years before I ended up going to law school. And most partly was because I wanted to get inside a law office and see from firsthand how the experience is. Now, my idea was if I didn't like it, I was never going to go apply for law school. So if I was going to do something, I might as well get a taste of it. So during the 2 years I was doing that, uh, I was like, you know what, I could still do this. I went through so many different steps. There was a minority law students or prospective law students seminar. I think UConn had, and I attended that. I got in my car, drove up to Stores or wherever. No, I think Hartford or wherever it was. Spent a whole day. Uh, I saw folks that looked like me, uh, and they were talking about how their experience was applying for law school, and some of them were lawyers for some years. I was able to keep contact with one attorney afterwards, and that inspired me to apply for law school. So took the LSAT, applied for law school, got in a bunch, listed on some, didn't get into others, but ultimately was able to get into a law school in St. Louis University, and I ended up going there.
Wow. So what advice would you give a young person or a working mom that's considering becoming a lawyer? Like, would you advise them to take the route you took?
I would advise them whatever works for them, because
Mhm.
my route, it just kind of fell in place for me. But I also know that if you have a family or other obligations, it would be very difficult to juggle all that. But it is possible because I went to school with parents. I went to school with
Mhm.
um, professionals in other fields. There are people in the medical field that were also trying to study law. One thing with law school that amazed me is like your classmates, your peers come from so many different walks of life. As long as you have that motivation, you can pretty much do it, you know.
Wow. Yeah, it takes a lot of motivation. Like I said, as a claims adjuster, I had fellow coworkers that were going to law school, and I'm thinking, how in the world, after a day of working claims, there's no way that I would be able to study law. So it takes, I really believe it takes a different kind of person. It's interesting about your background, though, and I understand now why you're such a compassionate attorney, right? Because you started off in a field where you literally were working with the disabled. So I'm impressed. I'm telling you, I have to tell you, I'm really impressed. I didn't know that. Right? We've almost spent a year together knowing, we spent over a year knowing each other, and I did not know that. That is awesome.
Yeah,
So,
it's only a blurb in the uh I guess when I do my feature presentation, I know there's like a blurb, it's easy to miss, because
mhm,
it's what however long it is, like less than a minute before you go into your presentation. But yeah.
mhm. Yeah, I've heard it over and over again. I guess I always heard everything except for that piece. That really, it's impressive. So tell me about, and you don't have to give the details, I know because of HIPAA and all of those different things, we don't tell people's information. But what case made you say, yeah, I'm where I need to be? What were some of the details about that case?
I mean, there's so many, so many. I've done different fields of law, mostly personal injury, but I also started out also doing some criminal defense. And even though I've had an impact on a lot of my personal injury clients, the only case that always comes to mind is one of the first cases I had, it involved a minor who was charged with an indictable offense.
Oh.
And he, the situation, and I won't go too much into it, but basically he was participating allegedly in this event where multiple people were charged. And it was like, I think when I first started at the firm that I was at, it was like maybe my first year out of law school when I started at this firm. And uh, the partner was going to handle the case, but I think some conflict happened. And he basically had me appear, on his behalf because, there was a conflict. I guess the calendar wasn't entered in correctly. And he's like, can you, make an appearance? And I was like, sure. Um, One of the things, just an aside, that's been helpful in my career is learning to say yes. To a lot of things early on, because it was a
Mhm.
learning experience. So I ended up, handling that case. I thought I was just going to do an appearance, but he ended up giving me the case to handle. And long story short, I draft prepared a motion to suppress. There was a video confession, but the
Mhm.
way that it went down, it shouldn't have happened. So I was able
Okay.
to file a motion and get it suppressed. And I remember at the motion hearing after we won the motion, and this is a young person, and his father was there, and we were able to get, I want to say, from an indictable offense to a dismissal. And
Mm.
at the end, the father just kind of gave me a hug. Like I did not expect it at all. I just had this in my mind, this victory.
Mhm.
Everybody gets to move on. Uh, and that's the first time, I felt that I had an impact, on someone,
Wow.
especially
Yeah,
for
a
someone,
hug.
right out of law school, and I wasn't sure of myself still at that point, and that kind of, you know, said to me, okay, you're doing the right thing.
Awesome. That's what I was going to ask you, because we watch all of these law TV shows and movies. And what's it like that first day in court? Like you're standing before the judge and you got your first case. And is it nervousness? What is it? What do those feelings look like?
It's a little bit of everything. Thankfully now, even though you're always going to have the nerves. If you don't have the nerves, then you're not alive. But like if for me, after doing this almost 12 years, I'm used to it now. But early on, I had no idea. So I was just ball nerves, and I remember one of the first hearings I had. I just kind of, just in my mind, fumbling around trying to, figure out how to make the arguments that I know, to make and whatnot. And uh, I think ultimately, just the experience of doing something over and over again, that's the only way you get comfortable. And, I think my first year was just a lot of trial and error. And I'm thankful for the experience I had in the first firm that I worked at, because that gave me the foundation of where I'm at now. So even now, when I'm trying cases and ultimately I'm trying to get my civil trial certification for state of New Jersey, uh, which they award to attorneys after you take an exam and you've tried enough cases. I'm more comfortable trying cases now than my first year. So
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
you're always going to be nervous because you're nervous not because you don't know what you're doing necessarily. You're just more nervous because there's a sense of there's certain things that's not always in your control. You do the best you
Mm.
can, but there's still that uncertainty of how will this end up. Especially jury
Right.
trials. When you're talking about that.
Awesome. I wanted you to express that, right? Because there's probably some folks out there, considering law school, and they're probably nervous, like, what is it going to be like? Because every attorney that I've talked to has said that being in the courtroom was exactly where they wanted to be. So I've never heard an attorney say that that's not where they wanted to be. Although I know some attorneys that don't frequent the courtroom at all. So,
Absolutely. You got attorneys that, they spend their whole career that they never step foot in a courtroom, and
mhm.
they do well as well. But I think for me, it's I'm a little different. I like that interaction. Even just going to court today, even was conversing, with a judge and defense counsel. But for me, it kind of makes me feel like a real lawyer. I hate to say it like that.
Thank you for keeping it real, Antonio. Thank you. I
Not to
appreciate
say that folks who are, doing, document analytics and all that stuff, that
it.
they're not real lawyers. They have a different task, but just it wouldn't be for me though.
And that's fair. That's really, really fair, right? Everybody has their part of the industry that they choose that they want to take part in. So tell me now that we know your background, what's the biggest lesson you've learned about justice and advocacy? Because that's a big deal, right? Justice and advocacy, people don't realize that's really what the heart of what you do is. So what's your biggest lesson or biggest takeaway for that?
Uh, my biggest takeaway is we don't have, it's not the best system. It's not the perfect system, but we try to apply it as best as we can. And the cruel reality is not always justice does not always prevail where it should. And that's one of the things that uh, I've come to learn over the years. But also, it does people do get uh, the best results and the best uh, outcome, you know, uh, through our system. So it's one of those things where it's not perfect, but it does work where it does. But when it fails, it is glaring, and I think we have to continually do what we can to improve, on that.
So, what advice would you give a brand new young attorney that is not winning cases right away? Right? They're not getting it. It's not happening for them. What would you say to them?
Just keep going. I mean, every attorney has that season, where you're
Mm,
just in a rut. I think it took me a year or so to even get my first trial victory. And then, even realizing that even the cases that you do try, some of the reason why you are trying is because, well, to be honest, the facts aren't great, and the insurance companies know that. So, don't always take it as you fail, but, use it as a learning experience and try to improve and get better with each and every step. I don't, for what we do, I don't believe in failure. It's always a learning experience.
For the kids listening, are there any? Because I'm a homeschool director, part time. It's
Hmm.
one of the many hats that I wear.
Hmm.
What subjects would you tell kids that are considering law to really kind of hone in on and sharpen their skills in?
Anything that stimulates your thinking, whatever is something that you can dive in. I wish I could give you a set list of things, but even when you go to college, uh, there's some folks who study pre-law or certain like political science, but honestly you can study anything that stimulates your thinking
Mm,
and analysis. I think it will prepare you for law school. Something, even typically if you take like, I didn't take any, but if you take a philosophy course or a course in logic, analytics, or anything that you're able to kind of really deep dive into certain questions and problem solving. That's helpful. Um,
mm,
for also even, my background, even in college, was studying sociology, psychology, and kind of looking at how people in social structures move and operate and understanding that.
mm.
It does apply in what I do because, I get to see different people, different perspectives, everyone from different walks of life, and also kind of even when you depose somebody, like how they respond to certain questions and all that. So, you know, I would say whatever stimulates you, whatever encourages you to think deeply, whatever favorite subject that is, I would stick with that.
That's interesting. That was not the answer I was expecting, right? I thought you were going to say history or English, but it's interesting that you say that. And once again, I'm going to take my hat off to you because what it says to me is that you really like what you do, and you're provoked by the fact that you get to interact with people and think and solve problems. You don't hear many attorneys describe their field that way, right? They
Yes.
don't. They really don't. They're talking about the law and what they know about the law and what you can and can't do. But for you, it sounds like the people aspect of law is really the part that you enjoy the most. Am I right?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Mhm.
because I did do some insurance defense as well, and there is a human component with that, but it's not the same as when you're doing the plaintiff side.
Mhm, mhm. Oh my gosh, thank you so much. Antonio, this was enlightening. It's not what I expected. I had all my questions right, but you gave answers that were a lot more realistic than I expected to get, as well as you made me think about law from a perspective that it really deals with people. It's not just about making money, right? Because a lot of kids will say, "I'm going to become a lawyer because I want to make money." Well, yeah, you'll make it, but there's a whole lot that happens before that. Um,
Absolutely.
so if you can tell us, where's Goldstein and Goldstein LLP? Give us a little background of where we can find it. If you're in New Jersey and you have a slip and fall, or there's an accident or something happens, how do we get a hold of you guys?
Yeah, so we're located over in East Orange, right across the border, right near Newark, and right in the middle of Essex County, really. We're right off of Evergreen Place on the fifth floor. If anyone's familiar with Essex County building, which is on 60 Evergreen, tall, probably one of the tallest buildings in the city. We're right in there.
Oh, cool. And then last but not least, we have to give a shout out to our BNI Matrix family.
Absolutely.
Yes. But I will say, and then this is the last question I have for you. How does that coordinate well with you, right? Being a member of BNI, how does that help your job as an attorney?
So BNI, even before, I never heard of BNI. I think when I first started at the firm is when I was recommended BNI, and I tried it out, and I attended a meeting, and initially I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know, okay, well, is it like a networking event, and then you just kind of pass your card, your info, and but uh, you know it's more than that. It's like the whole principle of givers gain. We're not necessarily looking for referrals. We're really there to build a network and trying to help each other grow. And even after the meeting, I'm always thinking, okay, what can I do to grow the chapter, help all the other members? I'm not thinking, gee, what referrals can I get this week or whatever, from, because, of course I've gotten referrals, from BNI, but that's not even my main focus. It's really just, networking with everybody, trying to build the relationships, and, that's really it.
Awesome. Antonio, thank you so much for joining me. I'm glad that you did this because a lot of our audience are also teenagers, right? And they're kids. So to be able to see and look at an attorney that may look like them or sound like them, or even have some of the thoughts that they had, right? You've really helped a lot. So I do thank you so much for joining me. And if there's anything else you want to say, or you want to leave a message.
Oh yeah, no problem. And I appreciate you having me. And always if offline could give you my info. And if anyone wants to reach out to me or has any questions beyond, or any questions of what to do or how to get into the field, I'm more than happy to have that conversation with them.
You. So, guys, if you are interested, please reach out to me or Antonio. Antonio authors at Goldstein and Goldstein LLP. But as always, we keep it real at DIJAH's Diverse Training Services and at DIJAH's Café, because we want to make sure that you're living a self-sustainable lifestyle. And in order to do that, you need to see what's behind the scenes of what's going on in the realities of the world. So once again, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Antonio, for coming on. And I want you all to, as always, develop it just as it happens. Take care.